Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in the midst of a still fragile economy and dealing with a recession, and what we see is continued conservative fiscal incompetence, buoyed only by the Liberal legacy of strong banking regulations, I might add, I'm pleased to rise today to debate this budget. When I read this year's budget, or more accurately, this year's conservative branding exercise, I'm reminded of Winston Churchill's famous words, "I never worry about action, but only about inaction." Unfortunately, the Conservatives' Economic Inaction Plan 2013 leaves us all worrying about our futures. We're left to worry about the lack of action to help those engaged in the fishing industry, which of course is of paramount importance to the province where I live in Newfoundland and Labrador. It's a worry especially to the fishers themselves. Rather than work with those in the fishing industry and support what could be a sustainable industry, since fish is a renewable resource, by the way, the Conservative government is cutting another $108 million over 5 years from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. This is in addition to the $161.1 million cut from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, again announced by the Conservative government in previous budgets. These cuts, coupled with the changes to the Employment Insurance Program and the impact on seasonal workers, will make life a struggle for those who work so hard to make a living from the sea. Mr. Speaker, there are over 80,000 Canadians who make their living from fishing and fishing-related activities. We fail to realize that it is because of their efforts we have access to one of, if not the best food source in the world. Fish is a food of excellent nutritional value, providing high-quality protein and a wide variety of vitamins and minerals. If the fishing industry was accorded the respect it deserves, Canada would not have dropped from 6th place to 8th place in the world among seafood exporting countries. Instead of slipping to 8th place, the industry could continue to be a major player in supplying the world with this major food source. Instead, it is treated with disdain by a government that has no appreciation for the industry or those who work in it. We are left to worry about the economic reality facing our seniors with this budget and the lack of action to improve their situation. Having given so much during their lifetime to help our country succeed, the government is prepared to ignore what should be their right now, if they so wish, to spend time with grandchildren, traveling, enjoying retirement during what many couldn't do when they were working. That's right. This government has decided in its wisdom, or dare I say lack of, to move the eligibility age for OAS from 65 to 67, forcing seniors to work an extra 2 years before they can live that life to which many seniors look forward. What is it about Conservatives that make them think somehow that the majority of our seniors have more than just very modest savings, if any, after years of being in the workforce, and deserve to be eligible for old age security at a time in their lives when they can still enjoy the benefits that come from receiving the pension income, as modest as it is? Ralph Morris, president of the Newfoundland and Labrador Public Sector Pensioners Association, is on record saying such changes as raising to 67 from 65, the age at which Canadians could qualify for OAS, will push many seniors into poverty. I think it is an attack, he said, and I quote, "I think it is an attack on the seniors of this country, again by a Prime Minister and a government." According to Susan Ng, the head of the Canadian Association of Retired Persons, and I quote, "CARP members will be disappointed that the federal budget contained little to address their priority concerns: retirement security, seniors' poverty, and equitable access to health care, affordable drugs, and home care. The modest measures are still welcome. Any other improvements would have had some immediate impact, but would mostly set the stage for the kind of future Canadians can expect in retirement." End of quote. We are left to worry about the increasing difficulty for young people graduating from post-secondary institutions, more educated than ever before, yet with worse prospects for employment, thanks to the continued lack of real action by this Conservative government. Committing to a job grant program that will not come into effect for another 5 years is not real action. Requiring cash-strapped provinces to match federal contributions in order to avail of the program is not real action. Freezing funding for training at 2007 pre-recession levels is not real action. Right. Unfortunately, The only real action from this government is the hundreds of millions of dollars being spent on self-promotion. So if you're looking for a job in the advertising industry, you might just be lucky, because as a result of this budget, that is the only place where you might find work. And then the job you find will be paid by your own tax dollars, hundreds of millions of which the Conservative government is using to shamelessly run a pre-election campaign. Fortunately, Canadians see through these tactics as they try to deal with just living from day to day. In today's economic reality, Conservative words will not improve the lives of those in Random Bureau and St. George's and the rest of Canada. Only positive action will improve this economy and create jobs. Unfortunately, this budget offers Canadians nothing but empty words. As a Member of Parliament for Random Bureau and St. George's since 2008, I know only too well the hardships faced by many of those I represent. Fortunately, Canadians are no longer fooled by the practice of dropping goodies in budgets to try to distract Canadians from the real message and inadequate performance. The difficulty is the budget is so short on detail that it is left to those of us who have the opportunity to read the budget documents to try and read between the lines and find out exactly what it is the Conservative government intends to do. The contradictions in the messages are alarming. For instance, in Budget 2007, the government promised almost $5.2 billion in new infrastructure funding for municipalities in 2013-14. Budget 2013, however, only offers $3.3 billion in new funding for each of 2014-15 and 2015-16. The Conservatives failed to deliver infrastructure funding announced in Budget 2007 and are now trying to claim that same money as new funding over the next 5 years. The Conservatives claim skills training is the most important issue facing the country, yet they actually cut training, and after inflation is factored in, by freezing funding at 2007 pre-recession levels. Talk about alarming, contradictory messaging.
That's right.
Predictably, Conservatives will decry how opposition members are not standing up for the constituents when they vote against the budget. It is unfortunate that the few positive measures laced in between extraordinarily destructive Conservative economic policy get caught up in the bigger picture. The Conservatives will attempt to reduce my opposition to their overall economic inaction to their standard speaking points. But, Mr. Speaker, allow me to address one of the changes that I not only support, but welcome wholeheartedly. Of particular interest to me, given my motion M422, to enhance veterans' burial assistance, the last post fund, was the increase in assistance for qualifying veterans from $3,600 to $7,376. Along with the Royal Canadian Legion, I support this measure. That is why I wrote to the Finance Minister before the budget was tabled to ask that the last post fund be enhanced. I was pleased to see part of my recommendation contained in the budget. In fact, if the Conservatives would agree to table this change in separate standalone legislation, I am confident they will find unanimous consent to pass it. However, Mr. Speaker, when I wrote to the Finance Minister to ask that the assistance provided be increased, I also expressed my concern for the 66% of those veterans' families who applied to the last post fund for financial assistance to help with the burial of their loved ones, but were denied. These denials meant that more than 20,000 veterans whose families applied to the last post fund for financial assistance were denied a dignified burial during the Conservative government's time in office. According to the Royal Canadian Legion, although the assistance increase is positive, it will have absolutely no effect on the number of deserving veterans in need who are denied assistance by this Conservative government. Following this change, modern-day veterans, in other words, veterans who served post-Korean War, are still excluded from applying for government funding. Fortunately, the government will have another chance to reconsider and support my motion in support of our veterans when it comes up for debate next month. And I sincerely hope that given the overwhelming support for my motion by veterans throughout this great country and the Legion's principled letter-writing campaign, the Conservatives will vote in favor of my motion and take the necessary steps to implement it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm interested. This member has piqued my interest since she deplored in generalities the budget, but never actually spoke about the measures in the budget. She indicated one measure that she'd support if it was a one-off vote, which is the significant increase in the benefit for our veterans and their families for burial. I'm wondering, I'm going to list a couple others, and perhaps she could indicate if she'd support these on a one-off vote, like the accelerated capital cost allowance for manufacturers for the next 2 years, something very popular with manufacturers. Would she support that in a one-off vote? The support for regional economic development right across this country, would she support that in a one-off vote? The indexing of the gas tax transfers for municipalities, would she support that in a one-off vote, Mr. Speaker? The massive funding for the Building Canada, would she support that in a one-off vote? If she's going to vote against these measures, Mr. Speaker, then what exactly is it that she supports?
The honourable member for Random Borough St. George's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for the question. And I think, as I said in my speech when I started, what is so difficult about this budget is that it's hard to pick out a few good points when there are so many negative points contained in the budget. So while I look to my motion M422 in terms of support for veterans, obviously I would support it. It's the right thing to do. I'm glad the finance minister agreed with my request to increase the amount from $3,600 up to over $7,000. That's important. But there are so many other issues that we are confronted with in this budget that are going to hurt Canadians. So while the honourable member can stand and rhyme off 3 or 4 things in this budget that he thinks are good, we can stand as members of the opposition and Canadians from coast to coast to coast and point to so many areas where the government has failed Canadians, and they talk about job skills training as being a priority. Well, Mr. Speaker, the reality is that there will be nothing in this job grant program for 5 years, and then the provinces and the employers will have to match the funding. If you can't, then unfortunately you can't avail of it. So that's just one example. If he wants more, I can certainly give them to him.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Burnaby Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just wondering if the honourable member could perhaps put herself in the position of the government and answer the question of whether or not the Liberals would be aiming to balance the budget by 2015, or perhaps they'd run a deficit. Thank you.
The honourable member for Random Borough and St. George's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for the question. And if he will recall, of course, it was the last Liberal government that ran a surplus.
Right.
That, in fact, we turned over a $13 billion surplus when the Conservative government took power, and they just burned through it. They just wasted $13 billion in record time, even before the recession had started.
That's right.
So we run balanced budgets, Mr. Speaker. We do the right thing. We look at what we can afford. We look at what's right for Canadians. And the Conservatives have run the highest deficit in the country's history. I can guarantee you, Mr. Speaker, that is something that the Liberals would not do.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my honourable colleague for Random Borough St. George's. I also, like her, could point to things that I was pleased to see in this budget, so she gives me the chance to say I was very relieved that Sustainable Development Technology Canada, which is a fund which helps commercialize clean tech investments and developments and companies across Canada, has received enough funding that at least it won't die after this budget. But I was surprised, and perhaps the honourable member can comment on this, the only sections on the climate change issue and the climate crisis in this budget refer to programs that they've already killed in previous budgets, taking credit for the very successful eco-energy retrofit program. I wonder if she believes that program should have been continued so that homeowners can get some relief on high energy bills.
The honourable member for Random Borough and St. George's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for her question. And obviously I agree that it should have continued. It is a type of program that Canadians have looked to and respected and understood how important it is, particularly when we talk about the environment and how important it is to ensure that we do sustain our environment and that we take the measures that are right and not find ourselves in a situation where there is nothing happening. I mean, if you were to leave it to this government, There is no discussion of the environment, and the facts and figures that are put forward are so convoluted that you can't even see the forest for the trees. So, Mr. Speaker, we're finding ourselves in a situation as members of an opposition trying to get a handle on what this government is doing with respect to the environment, and it's very hard to do it because, of course, they're not forthcoming at all when it comes to sustaining our environment.
Resuming